Center for the Study of World Religions, Harvard Divinity School.
And welcome to the folks who are also on Zoom. I'll just, hold this. It's great to have you here as well. Thank you. My name is Natalia Schween-Scott, and I'm a doctoral student in the study of religion here at Harvard University with a secondary field in Celtic languages and literatures. 3 years ago, I had the honor of co-launching the Thinking with Plants and Fungi initiative alongside our incredible program lead, Rachel Peterson, and I now serve as the program's advisor. It has been a joy to facilitate our reading group throughout my time on this initiative, and it's really wonderful to see so many of you here today. So, I come to the podium to introduce our speaker, and also, this is thrilling music. And also to start us off with a question. The question is, did people really speak to plants? The vocative case is not an obvious grammatical case in modern English. We see it more in the function and intonation of a sentence rather than in its form. However, we do see it repeatedly in the material featured in today's talk. Not only is it present in Irish Gaelic and Scots Gaelic, published in translation in the book I'll introduce in a moment, but it's in the English-derived texts in the form of incantations and charms. These ritual acts, often structured as a direct address, imply a relational act, though not necessarily a reciprocal one. I use the term relational not to indicate an exclusively non-extractive or harmonious relationship, but rather to describe a form of interaction between two subjects, two beings with personhood, understood here as the capacity for memory and agency. In these incantations, we see agency grammatically stated as part of the act of ritual itself. This is essentially my argument in a forthcoming article, The Plant Delighteth, Plant Personhood in the Study of Western Esotericism, being published by Pomegranate, an international journal of pagan studies, in the upcoming months. And this research that I've been working on for the last few years on plants in the vocative was, in large part, inspired by today's speaker. And with that, I'm thrilled to introduce Dr. Christina Oakley Harrington. I first interacted with her work nearly 15 years ago while living in London, around the corner from the most incredible specialist bookstore, a true intersection of scholarship and praxis, founded by Dr. Harrington in 2003 as a crossroads between researchers and practitioners of Western esoteric traditions. Dr. Harrington is an independent scholar of religion, originally trained as a medieval historian, and she now works on 20th-century witchcraft and the history of European herbal magic. She taught for 12 years at St. Mary's University in Surrey, and she's the author of Women in a Celtic Church, Ireland 400 to 1150, published by Oxford University Press, as well as Dreams of Witches, published by Blackletter Press, and numerous articles. From 2010 to 2015, she co-edited Abraxas, International Journal of Esoteric Studies. Finally, in that same vein, she is the author of the well-loved Treadwell's Book of Plant Magic, a meticulously researched compendium that explores the magical uses of common European plants drawn from over 200 historical texts. The book highlights the attributes that plants have been believed to possess, such as attracting love, enhancing fortune, providing protection, and even granting invisibility. Aimed at a general audience, the book has sold over 10,000 copies in the past 5 years since its publication. And so with that, I'm so excited and thrilled to introduce Dr. Christina Oakley Harrington to the stage. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Natalia, for your introduction, and thank you all for coming out at 5:30 in the afternoon after a long day. It is lovely to be here. My special thanks to the initiative in plant and fungi inquiries. Thank you especially to Natalia and to Rachel and to all the participants in the seminar I attended last week. Your contributions have actually fed into today's talk. A huge thank you to the Center for the Study of World Religions, to Laurie Sedgwick, who's the most calming presence imaginable, to Professor Charles Stang, and to Gosia Stalowska, all of whom create an amazing, amazing space in which to be a scholar in residence. So thank you for having me. Right, so should we talk about plants and herbs and magic? Today's my talk would run for about 40 minutes, so we're gonna take this bit by bit. I'm big on the pictures, but we'll run through it. But I want to start with a story, and the story is that I left academic life, which I enjoyed very much, to do something different in 2002, and in 2003 I opened a bookshop in central London, the purpose of which was to be a crossover between people who study magic and esoteric traditions in a scholarly way, or an anthropological way, or a sociological way, or a religious studies way, and those people who are practitioners. And I have been happily situated there ever since. This is the book that she's mentioned. And so this is where I've been for 23 years, and everybody walks through the door. If anybody wants to do an ethnography on esoteric belief in London, this is the site to just stand in. I invite you. And I do stand there many days. And the origin of the writing of this book, and the jumping off point, therefore, for this talk, is something that began happening some years ago. And this was, we do sell books, but we also sell herbs and bits and pieces at the back. And it was people coming in and asking for these things. Do you have Palo Santo? Do you have white sage? I need to smudge my apartment. And could you please sell me some High John the Conqueror root? Now, all of these plants are used in their particular cultures for purification, space clearing. I'm not an expert on hoodoo and conjure work, so I don't know what High John the Conqueror root is for, but it is used, and it is used enough that people are asking for it. And I have a slight sensitivity to the term cultural appropriation. And so, it's uncomfortable. These things don't grow in Europe. They're not used in Europe. Or if they are used in Europe, they're not used in the same way. And some of them we can't really get. And if I can get them, I'm not really sure whether, we're killing a plant species in order to import it and sell it. But this raised a question, which is how people are, and to what extent the popular practitioner is wanting to engage with plants, why they want to engage with plants, why they want to use them magically, I'm going to say, and what maybe is driving that, and how is it they're driven in such a way that they walk into a shop in the middle of London, in the middle of the one of the greenest islands in Europe, and ask for these plants that don't grow there. But let's start with why. I would say turn to the vegetal. I'm not a theory person, I'm an historian, my language is very simple. But this engagement with nature. One is, of course, that we are in a climate crisis, and there is an appreciation of loss of cultures, the Amazonian culture, and an awareness also of those cultures who engage with plants in an interactive, so we say inverted commas, animist way, in a magical way, in a sensitive, I want to say Martin Buber, ich und du, I, thou way. And in London, as in everywhere else, we have many, many young people getting off the aeroplane having been on their ayahuasca retreat. For those younger people, or people of all ages, who are sensitive about cultural appropriation, they think, well, if ayahuasca is an Amazonian thing and the Amazon is being destroyed and those cultures are being taken over, what is there something going on here in these islands, or was there, that was lost and we can re-find? Other, of course, tradition that has people coming in asking for a High John the Conqueror root, or Van oil I've been asked for. I had to look it up. Is the African American hoodoo conjure rootwork traditions, which are rightly and beautifully being appreciated, kept alive, treated with a respect that that I think they haven't had in a long time for people outside those communities, and therefore they are more publicly known about. And we'll come to the internet in one moment. I think a third reason that people are drawn to herb magic and plant magic now more than let's say in the past, when most European magic was done communally. You would join a ceremonial lodge. A lot of the magic was done in ritual form. Ritual magic was predominant. And that is to do with the changing nature of our society. People are, excuse me, I just overshot myself, that we have people are, not so commonly bounded to community. We spend a lot more time on our own in an overworked society, and that we spend, frankly, we learn a lot of things from the internet. So going into, writing off to strangers at a post office box saying I'd like to learn magic, and then going off as I did as a young person to an unknown address alone. God knows what could have happened to all of us, but somehow we ended up meeting people who taught us things. But most of those things were not herbal, but they were communal. And also, magical things attract mystical people, and mystical people tend to be introverts. So the turn towards plant magic has, I would say, a lot of things going on behind it. And the internet, is our main source of information, and it suits people who are introverted, need to do things on their own, and want to do things on their own. It does not require a temple, 17 people, white robes, and 17 scripts. So what's happening on the internet? This brings us to the internet. There is a whole branch of TikTok which is called Witch Talk. And this is the primary mode of consumption of information on magic for a younger generation, and increasingly for all ages. Specifically witchy topics. TikTok accommodates not only people being, anatomized socially, but also it delivers information in a bite-sized fashion. I think we all know that. I want to, can I have a spell to, protect, a blessing for my house? You don't want to read a whole book bite-size. And it is also that information is delivered in these short chunks that we need and like. So that's its appeal, let's say from the learner's side. I won't say consumer, but let's say from the learner's side. What is going on from the producer's side? Content creators of Witch Talk and many, many other, TikTok channels are not necessarily subject specialists who have been apprenticed for 20, 30, 40 years. I know this shocks all of you. And the nature of the late capitalism is such that you need clicks to generate income in order to stay monetized. And so therefore these TikTok producers need to generate content that they know people want, and they have to generate it every single day. This produces some remarkable results. And one of them is that in a world where there is not a common knowledge about plant magic that's European, it allows the content creator to, I have to get something out in 10 minutes, lavender, right? And we'll sell a lavender candle as well. And so I've picked on lavender, okay. And I've given us first the things that I have heard TikTok creators say. I have to come up with a spell a day, which I said already. Then the other thing I hear quite a bit is, it doesn't really matter because it's all about intention. So we have the primacy, I will say, from perhaps a more new age culture where it is mind magic with props. And then we have, because I own a business, I am approached by many, many candle sellers. And when I say, your candle for lavender, these attributions, do tell me about, these powers of lavender, like, where did you learn this? And say, it's really self-care. And self-care is about feel good. So as long as these words make the person feel good, we're all good, It's a psychology trick, as it's, in fact, much face cream advertising. So what we see with face cream advertising, new biomechanosers, they will do these magical things for you. we're just extending wellness into magical flavored wellness, because it's so. For those, all of these reasons, this is my ethnographic observed research from being in that spot that I am every day. And for those who find this dissatisfying, as I did, and many people do, there's a turn towards where is there a genuine Western European tradition for folk magic? The obvious place to look is to the traditions that we find elsewhere, where there are magico, herbal, healing specialists who have traditions that are passed down and are beautiful, protected, lost, semi-lost. And I have, an Indonesian dukun on the upper left, curandera on the lower left, a sangoma in the center, and a lovely Siberian shaman on the right. All of them don't work exclusively with plants, but they do work with plants, and they will tell you what these plants do. They interact with them, and they land in a passed down tradition. Where is Europe's passed down tradition? Where will we find this knowledge in Western Europe? And we're taught, culturally, to look among witches. And I won't rehearse the literature. Historians do like to do that, but I will spare you rehearsing the whole literature. But we start with Jules Michelet, 1862, La Sorcière, the witch, which is the first book that redeems the image of the witch as a misunderstood woman, either not beautiful enough or too beautiful, too independent, too socialist, too left-wing, too free, too anti-establishment, and she's a healer. This book was translated into English in the 1870s and was one of the many formatives on the witchcraft explosion of the 1920s, of which the foremost book is Margaret Murray's The Witch Cult in Western Europe, 1921-22. And this made its way even into literature. The most iconic book of that form, of that genre, is Mary Webb's Precious Bane, which is about a young woman who's about to be accused of a witchcraft and apprentices with a cunning man, and we'll meet Cunning Man again. It was with Witchcraft Today and the circle around Gerald Gardner and his female friends, who remained unnamed because they wished it, that there is a revival of witchcraft in which it was believed that these were people beneficent to their communities, who were a little bit mystical, who had magical powers. And so it would seem that we should look to either the imagined witches, which these all are, then maybe there was some reality behind it for an equivalent tradition to the curandera, the sangoma. Academic historians smashed this dream, frankly. Almost everybody who was accused of witchcraft in the witch hunting period, I'll call it, were women, 75% women in Western Europe outside of Scandinavia. And they had jobs like baker, housewife, and many accusations were neighbor to neighbor, and they were to do with jealousy, or if they were poorer women being accused, it was because they were asking for charity to the point and so persistently that their neighbors were creeped out and became afraid of the uncomfortable feelings of not extending that charity. In the most well-attested witchcraft records of the people accused of witchcraft are the Scottish records, because the Scots were even more literate to the English and even more obsessed with record keeping. Only 4% of those accused of witchcraft in Scotland had anything to do with magic or healing. One of the safest jobs you could be, in fact, was somebody who worked with magic. So the witch was, in fact, historically, and we can just hold our little hearts for a moment, was in fact not a curandera, a sangoma, nor was she part of a tradition or a sisterhood. These were random victims randomly accused by a setup created by judicial theologians. However, the persistence and the power of this, I'm going to call it a myth, beautiful one, but it is a myth. Persistence is owed quite a bit to a recently reprinted work of, I don't know the exact date, 1973, a pamphlet, a booklet written in a feminist context, not an academic or historical context, Witches, Midwives, and Nurses by Barbara Ehrenreich and Deirdre English. And I'm quoting a eulogistic review here, saying for reasons of class politics, women's suppression, blah, blah, blah. Wise women healers, leaving themselves the sole practitioners of their scientific medicine. So this here, the healing and the plant-based theme is really moved to the fore. Another reviewer says, another true believer says of Ehrenreich's works that witches were abortionists, nurses, counselors. They were pharmacists, cultivating healing herbs and exchanging the secrets of their uses. They were midwives traveling from home to home, village to village. For centuries, women were doctors without degrees, barred from books and lectures, learning from each other, passing on experience from neighbor to neighbor and mother to daughter. They were called wise women, and by the people, witches. Recently reprinted, often requested. So our wise woman healer is, in fact, here's an AI-generated image, which is deliberately chosen as such, for reasons just described. However, Western Europe has a vibrant, exciting, creative, and just extraordinary plant magic tradition. And the things that came out of it from the research of doing this book was how different it is, and I'm going to invite us all to embrace these differences. And the three that stood out for me most vividly: not secret, not medicinal, and not animist. I'll do these each in turn. When I say not secret, what does this mean? It means that the sources, that we have to remove the idea of there being a secret sisterhood of witches who were the midwives and healers with their secret knowledge. I mean, that we just got to put that in the closet. We just have to put that away because it's not there. So is it secret in some other way? No, it's absolutely not secret. I was trained as a medieval historian. I worked with texts, and starting in the 7th century, and by the time we get to the Elizabethan period, it all starts being mostly in English, which is my native language, and I've covered the whole range. This is a shared knowledge. This is open source. This is open source plant magic, and it's an open source culture. So these transmission happens via text, firstly. Also families and neighbors. But let's start with the text. One is, I'm just going to put some up. These are just illustrative. And we have one on the upper left, the first one there, is a 17th century notebook of a cunning man. And this cunning man's notebook is in his handwriting. We know what he knew, we know what he didn't know, we know what he charged his clients for. Cunning men, charge their clients who come to them for magical help. Almost none of this magic is herbal. Most of it is verbal charms and what I call like psychic magic, scrying, divination. Plants do not figure in it hardly at all. But we do have some plant things, and the plant things we find are not secret attributes of the plants. What we do find is this is good for this is good for that. And we find those in other people's work as well. Secondly, beneath that we have the Stowe's Survey of London, where we have this chap, 1603, saying this is what life is like in London. And this is what we do on midsummer. Everybody puts these plants on the floors, and then they put these over the windows. And then when we get to the autumn, people take these plants and they put them here, and they won't take them in and they won't take them out. So he's a contemporary reporter on his own culture. We have what are called receipt books, Lady Ascot's notebook. She was a grand lady running a grand house, and here is including with cake recipes, cough syrups, and then some bits of plant magic. This was not a secret book. This was stuff she knew, and there are many, many of these. We have Le Livre des Secrets, which are books of secrets. Any people who grew up in France here, in the countryside, as one of my very dear friends did. Oh yeah, there was a lady, books of secrets. The most widely read and published book of secrets, completely not secret at all. Everybody came to know it. Bestseller, the Book of Secrets of Petit Herbert, translated into English as, I'm blanking on what it is in English, but it's mass publication in the English world, but never so much as in the French. There's lots and lots of folk magic in there with plants, and it was, available publicly. Then a main source is, I've just given an example of a page about Cornwall, which is the Victorian antiquaries, the Victorian folklore collectors who were preceded by antiquaries. And these are people who talk about the curiosities of the peasantry. If you go down to Cornwall, they won't bring this into the house. They do this with the plants. And this was things that were freely told to them by people who lived in these communities. They were not kept secret from them. And they were people, they spoke to farmers, they spoke to innkeepers, they spoke to people generally. So it's not secret. So the texts are a main source that I draw on. They're obviously the sources that I'm most familiar with. But these things are also handed down right up to the present day. And afterwards, I can read you the tweets from my in-laws' family little WhatsApp group. I asked them for what do they know. Is there things that you know? I think you might ask someone in the village, or if you live in a town, it will be Mrs. Jones the baker 2 doors down. If you've lost something, she knows the things that you do to have it come back. And that might well be herbal. Common knowledge. We might say open source. The other thing that's open source is the way in which people interact with plants. And this is through the wheel of the year. These are through the years. And so there's a close interaction with plants in a magical way, in a way that the whole community does. And the things, again, this is what we say common knowledge, but things that everyone participates in. Up on the left, this did die out as crying the neck. So when the grain is brought in, which is a communal activity, the last bit of corn was thought to or understood either metaphorically, literally, or well, we just do it. This is practice-based rather than belief-based. But the spirit of the corn remains the last one, and it's very bad luck to be the person who cuts the last bit because the spirit's there. So often people, that there would be like a whole bunch of people would all throw their scythes in sickles, so that nobody was the one person who killed the last bit of corn. But however it was done, it was held up, and then it would sometimes become a corn dolly, and in this region, this part of England, it was called crying the neck, and everybody in that region gathers round and cries it. Other bits, communal activities is bringing in the May. So here we have the May Queen. Everybody knows that it's hawthorn that's put around her. It's not secret knowledge, it's everyone knows it. And everybody participates in it. We talk about the sensuality, the spell of the sensuous, to borrow from Bruno Latour. We just engage with it. Other common knowledge, this is a shrub outside someone's house. Most very, very common where I live in England is a box shrub, and it's got a lot of tiny, tiny little leaves. And it's just a very useful shrub. But if you go back 50 years, it was common knowledge, or in some parts anyway, the reason it was quite good, one of the reasons it was quite good, one, it's practical, but also that if a bad spirit wants to get in to attack you, or the spirit of a neighbor who wishes you ill, a witch, they will be distracted by an obsession to count all the tiny leaves before they get to your door, because obsessive counting disorder is a feature of demons, apparently. But it was just common, it was like, yeah, they'll count the leaves. So the more leaves, the better, and the box has thousands of tiny leaves. Other common knowledge all the way across the north of England and into Scotland is everybody knows about rowan berries and rowan branches as protection. There isn't a person who does not know that. They were put over barns, over windows, when you had made into crosses, made into bows, made into shapes. If you're in one village, the cross is definitely what you want with a red thread. If you're in the next village, that's all totally wrong and it needs to be a ring. But the common theme is that everybody knows it's rowan. And the last place where we find common knowledge that comes to mind anyway is the carrying by song, and song is hugely important, and ballads are hugely important carriers of common, of shared knowledge about plants. And in Shakespeare, I've just given you Desdemona's song, which is Desdemona's song, and Desdemona's song is a heartbreak song, and everybody knows that the willow is worn and sung to and sat with and drowned next to when you're heartbroken. Any folklore obsessive here will know the song sung by Steel I Span, All Around My Hat. I will wear the green willow for 12 months and a day because I'm heartbroken. And huge revival in the late 60s and early 70s of that song. But there are other, Robert Herrick, other people down the centuries in England have had the willow ballads. You say the word willow to somebody up until about 1950, they know exactly what's going on. So absolutely not secret. And I think one of the things I just want to touch on about things not being secret and being communal is the close interaction people have in groups with these plants. So here are people bringing in the May, which was a communal activity done on May Eve, 29th of April, and where we go out in the woods and collect May branches and boughs and birches, and it was everybody did it, particularly young people. The Catholic Church proclaimed that any babies born 9 months after this night did not have to pay the bastardy fee. So it was a free night as well. But there's something about, I would say, just invite us to park the thought about touch, sensuality, group experience, and intensities of affect that we do in a group. And when we think about things being open source and not secretive, but there is something else going on that I think is quite beautiful. Last thing that is, a couple of things that is not secret, is knowledge about what trees are good in certain circumstances and which ones are not. And so on the left we have the elder, and many regions around Western Europe hold that it is witches and elves who live in the elder tree and they bury their children under its roots. And the dead children of these witches, or evil spirits, revive as bees, butterflies, and caterpillars on the elder tree's branches. In one region in England, they say it's the fairies who live there. And this great, lovely plant folklorist, his name was Friend, and I adore him. He spoke to an old person who said, oh yes, but you can cut their branches in certain circumstances. If you say, elder, elder, may I cut thy branches? And if you don't get an obvious omen of disapproval, you can indeed cut the branches. Other places, you would not even risk that. You won't burn it, you won't make furniture out of it, you wouldn't make a child's cradle out of it. If you put a child or a baby into a cradle that was made of elderwood, frankly, everybody knows that child's going to die. Common knowledge. On the other side, we have the elder tree. Excuse me, not the elder. All right. The one on the right is the walnut tree. And so So the walnut tree is another tree that everybody knows is a bad tree. And both of these seem to cross across most of Europe. Much knowledge is regional and the details vary. But these you find all across Europe, when the details that vary are of a more minor sort. So Professor Giuliani, 19th century, witches love walnut trees. And in Bologna, everybody knows that witches gather at walnut trees on midsummer. And in Benevento, there's a walnut tree uprooted by St. Barbatus, but even because it was a meeting place for witches, but even after it was uprooted, everybody knew for the longest time that that's still where the witches met. And one of the things that was said moving on northwards to Germany, it's the tree of evil, of ill fortune, and if you go to sleep under it, you might die. Then we move over to England, far, far away on this little green island, Somerset. Somebody told the folklore collector, it's an evil tree. So again, this is not secret knowledge, this is communal knowledge. But somehow we're looking at personalities and not just medicinal properties. There's something about maybe personhood. We'll see about that. When we have this sense in which this is perhaps sort of occult knowledge, it's only because it is rejected knowledge. It's rejected as curiosities, as peasants, as things that the silly countryside people believe, and to be mocked. And the other way in which it is perhaps secret is that there was a tradition across Europe of people called the Cunning folk, and written in a pioneering way by Professor Owen Davis, who's the pioneer in the field and wrote a seminal breakthrough book where he studied in detail what Cunning folk do, which is a semi-part-time profession across Europe that many, many people had who were paid for consultants for magical purposes, either because you've lost a cow, you're having bad luck, you need help in love, and you would go to them and you pay them maybe in bread or kind, and they would prescribe for you. Now, they've very helpfully left enormous amounts of records. This is the beauty of literate societies. And almost none of what they did was plant-based. And it was not a handed-down tradition. One of the most remarkable findings of Davis's work was that they are self-taught. They would send away for books starting in the 16th and 17th century, with students would get printing in England, and they would teach themselves. And they seem to have been naturally psychic. And enough of an individual that they always came from a background, we don't say class until much later, but they came from a background that was just kind of as low down as you can get and still read and write. And they tended to be bright people, both men and women. And they could read, and they often had a big book, and they would dress oddly and sort of fantastically. So people need to be literate in a society, more literate than most of the people around them, happy to be an individual, a bit psychic probably, and wanting to make a career of a person apart. We know, certainly in England, that children did not want dad's job. We have the dispensation of people's possessions when they die is very well documented from 17th century English onward. And we know what the children did because of record keeping, which is fantastic. And, kids moved away to get away from dad's job. And they had very, very ordinary jobs. And we know that Dad, the cunning man, his dad did not do that. His mum didn't do that. So anyway, Owen Davis is God, basically. We do have some of their notebooks, and we do find the occasional plant spell in there, but it's rare. And just a big up for Tabitha Stanmore, whose book I love and launched, and it's a popular book that says, that just came out last year, which is kind of more for a general audience on this. So this isn't where we're going to find this secret stuff. Nor do we find it in physic. So pre-modern medicine is based on 4 elements, astrological attributions, and you go to a physician, generally who looked at a bag of your urine and the moment at which it was brought into their consulting room and prescribed for you. Some of them were had herbal knowledge, but many, according to Nicholas Culpeper, really, really didn't. And I mentioned him because he was part of a trend to popularize and make publicly available herbal medicinal knowledge. He was writing in the 20s, 30s, and 40s, died at a young age, and his English physician and his herbal have never been out of print since they were first in print. And he was just saying that everybody should have the knowledge of how to cure themselves with plants. And he gave recipes on how to do that. So even, I would just say in England, but also elsewhere in Europe, this kind of the knowledge of plants in a medicinal way was in a different realm, but even that was not secret. Now let's look at magic. What do these spells say? And the first thing we just have to say is a lot of these spells are not medicinality or healing framed in different terms. And I just, to make this point, I want to say, we have everybody, common knowledge again, but very, very exciting and hard to get. Fern seed from the bracken fern. And this will help you find buried treasure. So there's just no way, or invisibility. These are not coded medicinal attributions. And here are a few others. Vervain. If you put vervain under your skin, having cut yourself, the vervain will open locks for you. Very, very good if you're a thief or a burglar. So will moonwort, lunaria. And then here we have Fuller's teasel has the remarkable attribution of meaning that you can't get shot. And juniper helps you when you've lost something or had something stolen, they will bring this back. So it's not like, the spirits will help you, but really it's an antibiotic. These are just subjects that are really don't have any kind of elision there. And here we have our lavender. And when I went to do this research and I was compiling my vast, vast database of information, I was like, I'm really interested in what lavender is all about because it's so ubiquitous. Lavender does not come up at all, not even once in European folk magic, like zero. It was used all the time in cleaning, it was used on floors, it was used possibly medicinally, but it was absolutely, there is not a single spell or bit of folk magic about lavender. So anytime I'm offered a magical lavender candle, I really know where that came from. But that was really striking me, it really surprised me, because it is medicinal. And then we have to say it is not, and that let's talk about the entheogens, let's talk about the hallucinogens and the magic around hallucinogenics. And we do have a couple trees and plants which you will see things. You will meet the king of the fairies, you'll meet the devil, you'll meet a mysterious lady if you stay under them or you spend some time with this plant or this tree. These are not hallucinogenic plants. The alder tree is a very, very boring, everyday English tree. So there is spirit relation, but it's not the kind of thing that you'll see, that if you take ayahuasca, you're going to meet Lady Aya. Doesn't work like that at all here in Europe. And then when we have, what do we have about, let's say, magic mushrooms, things that we know work that way and we know grow in England and we know grow in Europe. Not a single piece of folk magic or folk spells around those, something like the magic mushroom. Simply not there. Of course, people are taking them and having very nice experiences. And there are some plants that they're using, to have dreams and go to sleep and, have fantasies. And but these are not absolute, these just does not cross over with folk magic and folk spells. And we can talk about witches' ointments and flying ointments in the discussion if somebody wants to save that as a question. I will deal with that then. The borderline for this, however, is psychological conditions. You know, if there's a Venn diagram between the magical and the medicinal, the only place that I could find it is in psychological conditions. And I don't know the biology of these plants, but Bethany is the plant that you use. Sorry, I'm messing up Bethany and borage. I'm so borage is for courage. I shouldn't have written Bethany there, beg your pardon. So borage restores courage and restores sadness. And yarrow, but here's one that's, I just can't think that it's in any way medicinal. If you have hallucinations or fantasies, hold a yarrow and a nettle together in your hand. Quite apart from hurting, it's not going to do very much. And we do have a plant magic solution. Arthur Gauntlet, who was a cunning man, he has a sanity spell, and this is where we have the Bethany. And so everybody knows that Bethany is good for insanity, but what his book has is a magical practice and some words that go with it. And this is where you put it on somebody's head, mashed up, and give them cheese to eat. And I don't know, it's a treatment for a psychotic break that I wouldn't go to first, but, you know, I don't know. So I think overwhelmingly, if not 100%, but certainly to a large extent, the folk magic tradition of plants is not a medicinal tradition. And thirdly, I would say we have to sort of gird ourselves and say it's not an animist tradition either. We need to remember we are in a Christian hierarchy. We are in a Christian world in which there is a hierarchy at the top of which is God, who created with voice and word, and beneath which are angels. And then there is human beings. And then beneath human beings there is the vegetal, animal, and rock world. And this chain, this ladder, is in everybody's. There really isn't thinking outside this box. When we're in Europe, from the 8th century onwards, in Western Europe, right? We're not going to Eastern Europe. We're not going to Scandinavia. But plants do have virtues, and God very kindly in this worldview gave plants little codes. So a marigold is sacred to the sun, because it looks like the sun. So this is the doctrine of signatures. But this is all done by God. This is not done by the plants. And nature, Lady Natura, who we see here in Robert Flood's image, is chained. See the chains? There's chains. God is above her, and she's chained above to God and chained below to the ape. So this is the worldview in which all of this is happening. And here we have the Witch of Warboys, 17th century portrayal, a witch portrayed, and even she is working with the plants and these creatures and these spirits and all these natural beings in a protective circle because they belong to a lower level of the ladder than she. And therefore, if she's working with them magically, they are dangerous to her, like demons are. And so she needs a protective circle, and she needs a wand to command them. So, and then we have picking herbs. This is where what Natalia was talking about, where people are speaking to herbs, and these exist in their hundreds and hundreds. And I've given you one for vein, which is the plant that everybody in Europe should be using, in my opinion, because it used to be used universally in southern England and across Europe for purification and protection. So if anybody wants Palo Santo, I try to sell them for vein. And it goes like this: all hail thou, holy vervain, growing on the ground, on the Mount of Calvary there was thou found. Thou helpest many a grief and staunchest many a wound. In the name of sweet Jesus, I take thee from the ground. Yes, we're addressing the plant, but we're also reaffirming that I am, I, the picker, am remembering that you're part of the Christian story and that you're there to help me. And then we have the things that is communal activities, which we really can't say are animist either, even though This is one is gathering in the maypole and gathering around a Christmas tree. This is not tree worship. I think it's maybe bordering there for some people, but this is not evidence of tree worship. But we start getting into personhood, and we're in the last 5 minutes. 7 to 8 minutes. I'm going to talk about personhood. For fernseed, there are these beings that are associated with them. The fernseed is under what some felt was Satan, or was it the king of the fairies, or is it the fairies themselves resenting Christianity? We're in this realm where plants have something to do with spirits that we can't quite classify. And same again, never go to sleep under a fig tree, because if you do, this unnamed supernatural figure will come to you. And so is this a presiding spirit? Is this a spirit of the tree? It's not part of the Christian universe. And somehow you know about it. Again, not secret knowledge, but if you live in a place where that tree lives, you do. So just to sort of kind of draw these things together, if these things aren't animist and they're not medicinal and it's not a world of a secret society, then while maybe it's not what we expected and it's not what we find in many parts of the world, it has, I would say, some potentialities. If it's not secret, it's open to the individual and the community to read, revive, and experiment. And that is what, I think 10,000 copies of this book in a short while. Scott Cunningham's Book of Plant Magic, huge bestseller for the past 30 years. People want to do that. And in direct experience is, it's less, we're not in an over-deterministic setup, nor are we in a gate-kept setup. And if it's not medicinal, perhaps this gives us an invitation to think with plants in a non-mechanistic way, not to come with them like, what medicine does this correspond to? Maybe we just have to come with bewildered curiosity. What do you mean, you can turn a lock? What do you mean you could make me invisible? So, maybe that unhooking from the medicinal mindset gives us more of an open mind. And thirdly, if the past was not animist, then doesn't mean we can't be. Individual felt animism, a sensitivity to nature. If there's been nature poetry written down the centuries, some of the earliest poetry that human beings have left that survived is nature poetry, which tells us there are people who have a sensitivity to nature and to plants and, to the more than human. And I think that those people are people of a particular temperament, and it's not generational, and we don't have to find a golden age, but perhaps there's an honoring to be had of what those people can bring to a community. And my last slide is, as we honor this kind of a shape of tradition, maybe we can invite the kind of revival that we did see in the communities of Western Europe, where it looks different, it feels different, but when something is communal and open source and guided by individual experience that anybody can read up on, experiment within, and access, there's an opportunity for cultural shift of attitude, which I think is an optimistic note to end on. So I will leave it there. Thank you.
cswr.hds.harvard.edu, copyright 2025, the President and Fellows of Harvard College.